G'day Bifrosters, as promised, this is the bounds tutorial. It sort of goes hand in hand with the time warp, which you can see down here. Like I did for the time warp tutorial, I'm just going to run through this really quickly first, and then we'll go ahead and build it ourselves. Let me know if you prefer that, or if you liked it the other way, where we built it and then did a quick run through. Just quickly to set up this file, what I've done here is I've brought in an alembic. I've hooked up a time warp to it with a modulo setting, with a loop setting on, sorry. So it loops every 33 frames. It's running at the speed that I told it to come in at. It's all good. The alembic possibly needs a little bit more interpolation there going on, which is great. I've got the feet selected, and I do that by just selecting the 20th value in the array of meshes that come in with the alembic. Yes, I had to go through them to find the one I wanted. It gets that from array and applies the bounds to it, and then removes it from the original array, sets the whole thing orange, not the whole thing, sets the one we got from the array orange, outputs it. And the bounds is this little grey box. And what this little grey box is doing is it's representing the bounds this object takes up. Let's have a quick look at the settings for the bounds. So we can have box bounds, we can have a sphere, we can get the X plane and the Y plane and the Z plane. This draws a lot from the Houdini node of the same name, or the bound node in Houdini. There are a couple of things that Houdini has that I haven't implemented yet, which are things like an oriented box, which I'm working on that, or oriented bounds. You've got your object in, which is just whatever you want to get the bounds of. You have divisions here. Now divisions are only, at this point, are only for these. If you wanted to have more divisions in these, so something like that, you can see now there's more divisions in the plane. So it comes in handy if you want to use this plane. This plane's points to do stuff, or whatever you want. Then you've got padding. You can have symmetric or non-symmetric padding. If you have symmetric padding, then the padding here is the one that's added, and you can see if we go to the top view that it's added a unit outside of everything. This might be a bit easier to see with the box on. Yeah, you can see now that's a bigger box. If I take that to 10 and 10, you can see it's just adding 10 to each of the bounds on the X and Z. It makes pretty much sense, and because it's symmetrical, it'll do it to all of the bounds the same amount. That's why we've only got 3. If you want to change the minimum and maximum padding, you can turn off symmetric, and you say I want 10 in the minimum Z. So this is really good if you were, say, doing something like I want to do some ground interaction, have some dust puffing up, but I don't want it. I want it to die fairly quickly. I'm going to use this as a bounds for my arrow, or whatever you want it to do, or a kill box for your particles, or something like that. So, and then you can, change. Maybe I want to have a bit of X in both directions. So we'll say 2 and 2. So now you've got a nice. That's symmetrical in the X. So maybe just a little more out the front as well. So just 2 out there. So now you've got like a nice quick bounding box that you could throw a volume into. Nice. So let's dive in, since we're doing the quick overview, and then I'll take you through how to build it after that. First thing we've got are our inputs. We've got quite a few of them. I also noticed one that I hadn't named yet, so let's do that now. It's the divisions array. So you've got the object in, then your symmetric padding, your min-max padding, whether you want it to be symmetrical or not, the divisions for your flat planes. This array in is basically, well, I'll explain it now. It's if you wanted to get the bounds of a bunch of points, you'd plug the positions into this array. I probably didn't name it well enough. But when we do the object logic, it'll become a bit clearer. And then you've got the type. The type is a custom enum. We looked at how to make those in the time warp video, so I probably won't be spending too much more on it today. But if you wanted to go back to the time warp video and take a quick look at how to make these, feel free, go ahead, make your own. It's lots of fun. Well, it's lots of tutoing around with Notepad anyway. Depends on your definition of fun. So once we've got all our inputs sorted out, then I've got this compound called object logic. And what this does is that it enables me to take a mesh, a volume, points, strands, or just an array of positions and return the bounds on it. And here's how it's done. Again, this is real quick. We'll be doing it more in depth afterwards. In it comes, you've got an object and an array in. Your array goes to the bounds goes through. This gets plugged into an if, and I'll explain that in just a second. Volume the same, volume comes in, volume bounds go out. Then object comes in, you get the point position of each, then you get the bounds of that array, and they go out as well. Okay, that's pretty simple. I'm doing all three things. It seems a bit redundant, but then we've got get geoschema type. And what this is it's basically a great big list of trues and falses, where you can say, what are you? What are you like, mate? What's going on? What kind of object are you? And then these will become true and false depending on what kind of object comes in. So I've got volume, I've got mesh, strands, points, and then this one, which I just discovered and I really like. It's not a geometry. So these are booleans. So they return a true and false, which means I can then start doing comparisons. So the first thing I did is, all right, okay, it's the same command really in terms of my thing for meshes here, for points, and for strands. It's all just get point position, find the biggest and the smallest point position, spit that out. So from here I'm going mesh or points or strands. If a mesh, strands, or points, that gets that true case, which is basically just object comes in, bounds got, object out. Object come in, point position, bounds got, object out. Next one down is if it's a volume. If it's a volume, it runs a volume bounds, gets the min and max, and spits it out. And then my favorite, not a geometry. So this will only work if there is nothing plugged into the object point and something plugged into the array point. It would always prefer to take the object result than the array result. At this point, I'm probably going to release a version 2 or 3 or 17 of this as I do. But what this does is it goes, I've got nothing plugged into my geometry. There's nothing coming through here. It's not a geometry. So what do I do? And in this case, I'm just like, look for an array. Is there an array coming in? Yes. Okay, get that bounds and then spit that out. So that's that. Right now, I don't have a default. I'm still working out maybe what to do there. Maybe just a unit cube or something. If there's no bounds, then just produce a 1 by 1 by 1 cube and stick it in the origin. Probably. And then once all that logic's out of the way, and I just got to make a note here that what I'm spitting these out to are basically they are arrays of 2. And so out here I'm just taking the first in the array for the minimum, the last in the array for the maximum, and spitting them out as my min and max. That then just gets fed into the thing that calculates all the padding. And the padding is fairly simple. This is like, is it symmetrical? Yeah? Okay, well you're using the symmetric padding. There's the max, there's the min, everybody's happy. Are you using non-symmetrical? So if it's false, yeah, well there's your min padding, there's your max padding. You're using those depending whether you're maximum or minimum. Yeah, fairly easy. This is the length, width, and height, right? So it subtracts the min bound from the max bound and just outputs the difference, which is length, width, and height. And this is for setting the position, and it's just adding. It's adding the max min bound and the max bound. And then once we get out here, it's taking half of it and then spitting that out to position. This is splitting the length, width, and height into 3 floats, which are, as you can see, are going freaking everywhere. So, working on this, these 3 are our planes. Oops, I went into the wrong camera there. So these 3 are our planes. This is what happens if I go Y to get the Y plane. It's not easy to see, is it? Let's go to Z. It's got to be X then. Really, I'm out of options. So these are the planes that are calculated for this. And they take, I'll just use this one as an example. They take the length and width from here. So in this case, we've got Z and Y, which will make an X plane. I need to rename that, and then rename this as well. That's what happens when you show off a work in progress, right? So you've got the two dimensions that make sense for an X plane. And when I say it's an X plane, its normals are facing along the X. So I need to get the Z in the way. Great. Then here are the divisions coming in, the length and width segments. And here is the position coming in, which is down here, which is half of the bounds all added up and stuff. So those up there are our 3 planes to be rectangles. And this is part of that, so we'll put it up there as well. I swear this is still the quick run through. I'm going to be going into this into a bit more depth. It might even be a separate video. Now we do the sphere. So the radius just takes the length, width, and height and finds the maximum, finds the biggest one, gets half of it, pops that into a sphere and then adds the position on the sphere as well. So again, if I get a sphere, there it is, which is why if you play it, you can see the sphere's size change. Because when the 2 feet are close together, it's a smaller radius, and when they're further apart, it's a bigger radius. That's pretty simple. And then last but not least is the box, which is the simplest of all. Length, width and height go in, and position goes in. And then we go into the chooser, and the chooser is just implementing the enum we talked about. So this is implementing this box, sphere, rectangle, x, y, and z. Box in, sphere in, x, y, z in. It's literally just choosing based on what you've chosen and spitting it out. Pretty simple. Sets the color, and that's what gives us the slightly transparent dark gray, just so we can see what we're doing, and then outputs it. And then it also outputs the minimum maximum bound as well. So if you come out, there it is, a little bit of an interface on it. That's the bounds node. That's the quick walkthrough. So there's a couple of other things still to do on it. Like I said, I'd like to orient the bounds. I'm still working out a way to do that. All right, now you can stop here. That's the quick overview if you think you kind of got it and you want to play with it. And of course I'm going to supply this to you now. I'll supply the compound by itself, and I'll give you this file too as part of the tutorial. No, have a great time. See you later. Go off, enjoy the rest of your day. Have a cup of coffee. So for those of you that are staying, we'll go on to building the bounds node from here. Okay, so first things first, we'll unplug this guy. We'll leave him up here for reference. So bye bounds. Let's make a new compound. And we'll just call this bounds in progress. And like I always like to do when I'm building something, I'm going to try and get the functionality working first, then move on to actually putting in the interface and all of the fun stuff about choosing and doing stuff and blah blah blah. So I'm going to need, first I'm going to do the easiest, of course. I'm going to do the box. Let's get the point positions. We'll go for the heart of a bound system, which is array bounds. Gives me the biggest and the smallest in the array. And then I need to construct a cube. Create mesh cube. All happy and good. So these two have to become the size of the cube, and the midpoint between the two has to become the position of the cube. So to get the size of the cube, we subtract the maximum, and we subtract the minimum from it, convert that to scalar, and literally width, height, depth, length, width, height. Although I think it depends on your definition of length, width and height, for example, but let's pop this out and take a look at it. We'll just hook that up to the outbounds and see what's going on. That looks about right. It's in the wrong place, but it looks about right. That's, yeah, that kind of looks to be the right thing going on. Oops, we'll go in there. So now we get our position, so let's add these two together. I want to add the minimum and the maximum, and I want to get half of them, like this, and I want to pop that into the position, and there you go. A little bit not quite right here, which could be all kinds of things going on. I'll have to work that out. Let's just quickly add that color, like this. Still haven't set up a color node, object color node, which would be so much faster, I guess, but you know what, can't do everything. And then we do color. There we go. Oh no, that's right, I was thinking that his toes were part of the bound, so that's working. That's the easiest one of them all. That's the box, and off it goes. So the rest of it is only slightly harder. Now that we've got these guys, this is going to give us the ability to do all three of our outputs as and when we want it. So for the next one, we'll do the sphere. So I need a max node. What a max node will do is I can put a bunch of stuff into it, and it will give me the biggest one. So this is just going to give me the biggest axis. Yeah, and I take half of that again, half off, and half of the biggest axis is going to become the radius for my sphere. So I'll just put this in here. Mesh sphere. Oops, I didn't want it to do that, so we'll just take that guy, put it back in there. There we go. So our radius is half of our largest axis, and we already have our position, which is this guy here. So let's turn on transform, and let's have a quick look at our sphere. Yep, that looks like it's doing the business too. So yeah, really the guts of it is this stuff. Everything else is just organizing and logic. So the logic for what happens if I put a volume in there, what happens if I put a set of points in there, how am I going to work that out? That's the logic part of it, and the enum is just allowing us to choose what we output from here, more or less. So let's go ahead and do our planes now. So I'm going to need 3 mesh planes. Create mesh plane. We'll just call them X, and then Y, stop that, Y, and then Z, as per, and this is where we just, that was X, goodness, I haven't had enough coffee. This is where we need to start like working on what's what. So just to make things a little tidier, I'm going to bring these 3 down here. Throw some pass nodes just to organize my noodles. It's the organization of the noodles. I've got to keep these in my head, so we'll go Z-axis. And that is, I believe, the Y. Yes, it is. But it pays to check. Y-axis and then X-axis. So to get an X plane and a plane that is pointing along the X direction, we're going to need the Y value and the Z value. So we have those. That's what these guys are for. Put these out of the way. And again, we already have our position, so we can already just plug our position into everything. But our dimensions is what we need. And what we need is, so the length in this case is going to be the Z-axis. And the width is going to be the Y-axis. I know it's the height, but let's plug this in here just so we can see what we're doing as we're doing it. But I need to change my up axis here. That's where I was getting things wrong. So that needs to become 1 for X, and now we've got what we were looking for. And it's just got default divisions in there for now. We're going to need to be doing something about the division, so I might as well just quickly do that now, and it can be the first control we set up. So if I go out of here and into a pass, because I'm going to be needing it for a bit. And the thing about the segments is they need to be longs, I think. Ints. So these have to be an int. Easy enough. We just go to int. And until I work out how to do this for things like spheres and cubes, I'm going to leave it so that both dimensions are always the same. So we'll just plug this into this for now for our segments, and then if we jump out here we can give this a 4, and there you go, you can see that it's worked. And then we go up to 6. Yep, there we go. So great, and 0 will just go at 1. So we'll leave that here as well, so that we can do that for the other ones. So let's get smart. This one should be alright because the y-axis is already. We'll need to open all 3 of these out. Our dimensions go straight in straight away. Sorry, our divisions, not dimensions. Because it's a y, it's pointing up, I'm going to need the x and the z. So let's call the z-axis the length again. We'll keep everything consistent. And the x-axis the width. And I'll plug this into the output and see what we get. That looks pretty good to me. Except we need to put the position in, of course. Put the position in, and everybody's happy. Great, one more to do. And it's just rinse and repeat now. In there, in there. Don't forget to change the axis, the up axis, like that. Let's get the output running so we can see what we're doing straight away. Let's doesn't have any dimensions yet, but it's at least pointing along the right axis. For a z-axis, I need the x and the y. So the x will become my width again, and my y will become my length again. You can see it changing there, and then we plug in the position like so, and we're done. Lovely. Right, that's all of the functionality in. That works exactly the same as the last one. It has cube, it has a sphere, and it has the 3 planes. From here, we tidy up. Okay, so what I like to do, what should we do first? Let's do the enum first so that we can actually start switching our outputs around, yeah? Okay, so if you want to find out how to make a custom enum, go back to the time warp video and take a look. I'm going to use the one I already made. Here's one I prepared earlier type stuff. Oh, I really hate it when you do this, Bifrost. Maybe I'm doing it. Anyway, custom enum lives here. My ones will be under Valhalla because that's what I call myself. And I believe it's called bounds. Okay, and we can test that. Box, sphere, rectangle, XYZ, that's perfect. So let's make a little chooser compound for this. Like this, it's great. And we're just going to hook up everything to it. Sphere mesh is good, cube mesh is good. These ones I'll name. Plane mesh X, plane mesh Y, and I bet you can guess the next one. Plane mesh Z. It's not doing anything right now. Let's put the color in there as well, so we'll copy that. Jump in here. Pretty much nothing in here right now, but we're going to get something there in a minute. Put that in there, and it's going to be my out. So we're just going to set this transparent gray all the time. We can obviously go back and change that. That's my inputs. So now here is the choice that our user needs to make. So now if I select this, I've got this here. All good. That's great. I don't actually want it on there though. I want it on the input of this node. You can go in there. And we'll just call it bounds type. Like so. And there it is. Everybody's happy and lovely. And let's just get this called divisions. And you know, I'm going to make it an int. Just because I want to. And then I can get rid of this if I want. Let's just plug that straight into the toInt and get rid of a node so we're a bit tidier. He said, looking at that. Back to our output chooser, which is obviously what we were working on. So doing this real quick, here's our choice. I need another copy of that. So this is going to be, are you guys equal? Is the input equal to box? Is it? And if it is, then cube mesh comes out, gets plugged into the color, and goes out to the output, and everybody's happy. And I know this is going to take up a little bit of room, so let's make some room at the very start. Then I'm going to need these two guys. Copy that, paste them down. Box becomes sphere. Is this equal to sphere? But I need an if. Sphere mesh. Plug that into the false there so we can start daisy chaining. And you're starting to get the idea. It's very much rinse and repeat, but once you've got it all set up, it's lovely. So this is our X plane. And that's another equal. Don't need to do anything to that. If node in here. That goes out to the false. Everything breaks for just a second. We put that plane mesh X in there. Everything's happy again. 2 to go. Speeding through it. Do you just love my rows? Nice tidy rows. Why am I trying to rename that? Don't have to rename that. This is our rectangle, this is our Y. And that goes in there. And last but not least, the Z direction. This becomes rectangle Z. We chuck in an if as per. So I'm kind of rocketing through this. Like I said, I give a more detailed explanation of this especially, this process especially, over in the time warp video. So feel free to go ahead and watch that. Screwed that one up a little bit, we'll pop that in there. So, but essentially what's going on is you have your value coming in. That's this guy. So this is whatever the user's choosing. And all this is doing is comparing it. Is it a box? Is it a sphere? Is it one of the three rectangles? If that's true, they get passed into these ifs, and they're all plugged into the false port of the last one, and then out they go. And this works because enums can literally not be two things at the same time. You cannot have box or sphere, or box and sphere. I mean, I guess you could if you were plugging an array in there, but this is not designed for an array just yet. It does work on one though. It just sets them all to boxes if you've got it set to box. Works on a single object, works on arrays. All good. So now we've got our chooser set up, and we can prove that by just getting rid of this guy, sticking him out to the output. And right now he's set to box, set him to sphere. That works nicely. Rectangle in the X plane, that's great. Y, yep, flat plane, and Z going the other way. Lovely, that works. So there's all my logic. That's that done. I can grab all of these and I can minimize them and I can try to lay them out. That worked all right. Yeah, that worked okay. Do the same with this because I don't need to do any of this anymore. They work. We'll lay that out there. And I'm going to need everything from here for our next trick. But these guys can be minimized and laid out as well. Excellent. We can put a backdrop around that if we want to, or whatever we're talking about. So now basically we just need to do the input logic. We've done the output logic. The output logic is, am I a box? Am I a sphere? Etc, etc, etc. The input logic is just a little bit trickier. Basically I need to take a look at what's coming out of here, and really all I need to provide out is the bounds. So these guys, I can take these guys, I can put them into a group, which is just like length, width, height, and position. Yeah? And rename that to, that's my pos out. And these are X, Y, and Z. Oh, caps lock on. Position out, and then my X, Y, and Z. So really all I need to give to this node and all of these down the chain are the array bounds. And the array bounds are going to change depending on, obviously, on what comes in. At the moment, I'm just assuming it's an object, getting its position, sticking the array bounds on it, throwing it out. It works because this is an object. However, I'd like this to work for just a little bit more than simple polygon objects. So let's go and get a little bit crazy. We'll leave this as it is, and we'll just to volume, mesh to volume. And I'm going to turn off, what am I going to turn off? I'm going to turn off the bounds for a start, then you'll see those, and take this guy, plug him into his own terminal. It's probably the safest way. Terminal, into the diagnostic, and let's just go pump up this fog density real hard. Boom, lovely. Set our resolution to absolute. So obviously you don't think you can see it, but it is there. There's his boots, which is the object we had selected, and you know, if I change my selection to say 15 or 1 will do, those are his elbow pads. You can see that that all works nicely. Undo that because I forgot the number. His boots was 20. Okay, cool. So I need to find the volume, the bounds, and I need to find the minimum and maximum bounds of this volume, and trying to do this with something like a array bounds, I actually don't know if that works or not. Let's try. No. Not surprised really. I could do something like, you know, you can, in a mesh you can get point positions. I could get the bounds off that, and here I could get voxel position, which is part of the Rebel pack, and I could get the bounds off that too. That would work. However, I don't have to, because what I can do when I can use O's again, I have a volume bounds, and this will give me the bounds of the volume. Now if I plug this in straight away, it's going to have a crack at working, but what's coming in is a mesh. Oops, I'm in the wrong place. No, I'm not in the wrong place. Okay. Yeah, what's coming in is a mesh here. So it'll have a crack at the volume bounds. Not sure if it'll be accurate or not. Maybe it will. I honestly haven't tried, and I think I'm just going to go with this way. So if I plug a volume, this volume here, if I plug it into the mesh, oh, I'm going to be so embarrassed if this works. Thank goodness it didn't. You can see I've got no bounds there. It has no idea what to do with the information, because there's a volume coming in. It's trying to do all this mesh stuff to it. What I need it to do is volume stuff. That's not the one I want. I want the object. Just this guy. See, that now works because it's got a mesh plug back into it. So I could have some plugs here. I could have a mesh plug. I could have a volume plug. I could have a points plug. All good. What I'm going to do though is get geoschema type. Okay. Schema, I don't know. Let's call the whole thing off. Not sure. But what this does is it goes, hey, what are you? Are you a volume? Yes or no. Instance? Yes or no. Mesh? Yes or no. These are all booleans until you get to here. It's a little different. You can leave that one the hell alone. But these are all booleans, and because they're all booleans, I can do stuff with them. Yeah. Remember, all we need out are the bounds. So let's copy these guys, and let's group this into. We'll just call this input logic. Stay with me. We're really just doing the same thing. Just a little bit well laid out. So this is nothing's in between this and the outside of this compound. This is the input raw coming in, and I'm trying to decide what to do. So first off, what do I do if it's a mesh? Now I happen to know that mesh strands and points all work the same. I mean, in the end, what I'm going to do is I need to get its point positions and the bounds of that array. That's what I need to do. So if it's a mesh, or if it's strands, or if it's points, if it's any of those three object types, mesh, strands, or points, yeah? I just need to put down an if, so that, and this is our true case. So if it's any of those three, this will work. Getting the point position and getting the array bounds. This will work fine. So work fine, this is what we're going to do. We just need to find a way to get these two into one. And the way to get the two into one is, easiest way to do that is I build an array. And this way I can keep my things together. So I know I'm putting the minimum bound into the 0 point of the array and the maximum bound into the 1. Which also happens to be, and out we go, array, but putting one thing into the 0, one thing into the 1 also happens to be first in array, last in array, which is what we're going to be needing later. But either way, if this is a mesh or a strand or a point, do this to it. And then we're going to have to do a little bit of decoding at this end, but that's easy enough. At this end, we need to do first in array, and that becomes our minimum. Last in array, and that becomes our maximum. And then we just need to output these two. Min bound and max bound. So that removes that and it removes that. Let's just make sure we're set to box, and let's see if this works. Nothing broke so far. Nothing broke so far. So we can get rid of this now. Basically, I've got a mesh coming in. My logic says I'm a mesh. So if I've got a mesh or a strand or a point, do that to it, spit that out. And now we can do the same sort of thing with volume. So we just take this array, we go volume bounds, like this, which is great. And then we can just copy and paste this array, build array, make sure that min goes to min and max goes to max, because that can get confusing. Just get these out of the way a little bit, and I just need to build another logic. So this is a volume only, so we don't need any of the ors, we can go straight to the if. And of course plug that into the right thing. So if this is a volume, we want to do that to it. We want to get the volume array out. And we plug that into the false case. So again, we're daisy chaining up. Well, it's not a mesh. What's next? Is it a volume? Yes. Boom, out it goes. Okay. That's all we need to do to get the volumes working. And we can totally test that by unplugging our mesh, and the bounds disappear, and we plug in our volume. And this didn't work before, but it works now. Now I've got the bounds of the volume coming out. So we haven't added any of our functionality to do with padding or anything yet. We're going to do that last. But just to show you the bounds, we're now working with both volumes and meshes. I chose the wrong one, didn't I? I did indeed. That's okay. There we go. So we work with both volumes and meshes. The last thing to do is to work with just points. So I'm going to need the points to check that. Let's go for, just to get point position will do. Now this is where we run into the point type. If I set this to like an auto port right now, plug that in, everything's going to break in here because the input logic is expecting something else. If I change that to auto, again, it doesn't break. So this is the one that does break, sorry, it's still broken. This is the one time where I need to, oh, come on. Oh, no, we're not happy. Port type, object. Port type. Ah, there we go. So now we're working again. Sorry about that. This is the one time where I need to make a different input. Just to, in my bounds, just to get, what am I doing? I lost my get point position. Did too many undos. I was a bit sort of frantic on the Control Z there. Let's just quickly add that back in. So I need two inputs for this, because I'm not going to have an object coming in for these. I'm going to have an array of points, and they don't have to just be the points in an object. They can be points you've calculated that you want to get the bounds of. So say you wanted to have a laser beam hit him in the chest, you might want to calculate the bounds of the points that you are calculating for the splash of the laser beam, so that you can do things with it. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to pop that in there. And this is where our last, let's move these up so we've got things a little bit more organized. This is where our last bit of logic comes in. So now we've got the point position coming in. It's going nowhere. Let's plug it into the input logic. So what do we do with this?
Because all we're going to need to do with this is get its bounds and send it on its way, right? So we really just need these two. But we need these two plugged into the point position, which just gets the bounds and then builds the array, and it'll send it on its way. That's where this comes in, not a geometry. Now, with the not a geometry, and it just works the same way. This is a really great handle that basically says, well, you're not a mesh, and you're not a volume, and you're not an instance, and you're not points or strands. I don't know what the hell you are, so I'm just going to chuck out a yes on not a geometry. Which is, in this case, is super, super handy. Because our points are not a geometry, they're an array of points. We can use this to output it. You see, again, these are just all in a two-value array like this that are going out, and this can go out to the false case. Now, there's only one caveat. Because this is at the bottom of the chain, if it's either of these two things, it'll ignore this. So if you have a mesh or a volume plugged in and a bunch of points plugged in, it's going to take the mesh or the volume first, because they're further up the chain. If you wanted to prioritize points, you could put this at the top and chain everything else coming into it. But I'm going to leave it at the bottom, and I just know in my head that all I've got to do is unplug this, and this will work, basically. So now, let's test that, because I think we're working for our input logic. Is our point position coming in? Right now, I've got a volume coming in. The point position isn't even being noticed, it's doing the volume. What happens if I unplug the volume? So I'd expect to see it break if there was nothing on the point position. No, it just got a little bit closer because the points are different to the volume. Let's just change this selection, say back to, say 8. I don't know what that is, but it'll do. Oh, it's one of the tails coming off. And you see there, it's still making the volume because we've got the volume visible on our diagnostics. But the bounds are coming out of the points. So if I just smack the mesh out instead of the volume, like this. Yeah, obviously. Like that. And you can see, because the wireframes are in, you can see the points there. And you can see this is getting the bounding box of the points. Alright, well that much is working. Great, we can now look at volumes. Now if I leave these points plugged in, and then plug in, say, the volume again, very carefully watch the bounds. See how they expanded? Because the volume is taking precedence over the points. It's further up that daisy chain of logic. So it's tested first. Like I said, if you want to test the points first and make that a priority, that goes in this slot, this goes down. These all move down. But I like doing it this way, so I'll leave it to you. Alright, we've got that working. We've got one more thing to do, which is to implement all of our padding. So if we come back up here and look at our bounds, we've got the padding, symmetric padding, minimum, maximum padding, and whether symmetric is on or off. Alright, so we will do that now. Okay, so this is working pretty well. We've got our alembic in, we've got our logic inside. Our bounds working quite well. This is all of our input logic. So now all that's left to do is the padding. Do that in between the bounds coming into the length, width and height and the position and the input. So let's work on that. First thing we're going to need to do is we need to get ourselves a padding value. So we're just going to do the symmetrical padding to start with, and then we'll work from there. So we'll just grab a new vector, 3, and out we go, and then I'm just going to delete that. I don't need that wasn't helpful. Float 3, rename, padding. Great. Here's our padding. So what we've got coming in here is a sequence of 3 numbers, x, y, and z. So to do the symmetrical padding, we just quite simply need to take this one. This is the minimum bound, so we're going to subtract. We're going to subtract the minimum padding from it, and then we're going to add the maximum padding to the max bound. It's because the padding is the same number. Let's give it some numbers so that we can see if it works. Let's just go 2, 2, 2, 2, do 4 2 just to make a difference. So if we put the, wrong one, if we put the padding into both of these, like so, and then just change our outputs, you can see that our box quite happily expands. And I'll change the padding. Now, this is Maya units this is working in, so whatever you've got your Maya units set up to is what it's doing. So there you go. That's how you do the symmetrical padding. That's pretty easy. I have a feeling we're padding to the volume right now looking at that. Let's go and see. We are. So we'll just take the volume out and now we're padding to the points. Well, we're using bounds to the points here. Great. That's our symmetrical padding done. That's how simple that is. We don't actually have to do anything else in terms of adding or subtracting. What we have to do is change some things. So let's rename this to, how many M's in symmetric? 2. Symmetric padding. And then we'll make a new one. I'm just going to plug that in there and then, maybe I'm not. Can I just add a value node? Goodness me. Plug a value node in there. Rename that to just padding for padding. Padding will do. Padding. And we'll make sure that it's a float 3. So this will be our non-symmetric padding. So for that, we need to actually have 2 of these. So we have the minimum padding. And now we have to go through all of that fun of creating a new one again. Why don't I just do this and then delete that port. There we go. Float 3. Max padding. So, hello. That's awfully interesting. That's better. There we go. So this is pretty much going to do exactly what you think it is. We're going to take the min padding and we're going to throw it into that subtract. We're going to take the max padding and throw it into that add, and then this just means you can change them. But they're already being taken up by the min, the max, and the symmetrical padding. So this is where we need a little bit more logic. So let's make an if statement. We're going to actually need 2 of them. One for max, one for min. But they are going to run off the same condition. So that condition will be symmetric. So basically, if that is off, if we don't want symmetric padding, then we need to do our adds and subtracts. But if it's on, we're pretty much using whatever we're doing now. So that's pretty much the symmetric padding comes into the true up here and into the true down here. And then what comes out of here goes into the padding, like this. You notice that nothing's changed so far. If I go off here and turn on symmetric, there's no changes to be made at this point in time. So now we just hook these up to the false case. So remember that our minimum padding is on the top. We'll put in a little backdrop in there, and our maximum padding is on the bottom. So we're not symmetric. Let's see if this works. So we just want 2 on the bottom. That looks pretty good. 1 on that side. Yep. And -2. No, don't be silly, Jason. 1 on there. That's looking pretty good. Now we'll go 1, 2, 1, which is keeping it symmetric anyway. But no, that's all working. That's great. That is the bounds node rebuilt. Let's tidy it up and make it cleaner so that we know what we're doing, and I'll save it off to, I will save it off to the directory, and you will then have access to it. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to leave the input logical by itself. These guys I'll just leave as is and group them, and we'll call that padding. So now we've got the input logic. We've got the padding. They're still happily providing our length, width and height and position, which is going out here, doing all of the magic that the switches inside here do, and outputting a result. Lovely. So I don't think I'm going to be using backdrops, but I am going to tidy up the nodes just a little bit,
and before I save it and hand it off to you guys, but we are pretty much complete. We have rebuilt the bounds node. And like I said, the next steps for this is oriented bounds, which will mean finding the longest axis and finding the angle of that axis and then rotating everything accordingly, I think. But I'll get back to you on that. This should work with things like Aero, because that's just a volume, and we have a volume plug. Let's just tidy up the interface and then I'll let you go. So we'll jump out of here. This interface is pretty ugly right now, so I want to put the bounds type at the top so that I can select, whatever it is I need to select. Up there, that's the first thing I want to do. This value needs to be named, so object in will do, and this needs to be named. I'm going to call it positions in. So these are our two inputs. I'm going to drop the divisions below that, right click, move port down. Now the padding, I want to put in its own group inside the interface, just for tidiness. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab one of them, add to group, new group, and just call it padding. And you can see that this group is turned up in the parameters box, and it's turned up on the node itself. And then we just add these, all of these to the group. So now we have a padding group that we can fold away, nice and tidy. Do we want symmetric padding? Do we not want symmetric padding? And there's no zero, there's no padding right now at all. These should work as floats too, so 0.1. Oh, that's very interesting. Let's just switch this to box. And then oh no, that's working. It's just that it was non-symmetrical and I was getting a little confused. So that's it really, that's our new bounds node. Let's have a look at the old one. I have an output. That's the last thing I need to do before I do anything else. And that's quite simply outputting these bounds. So let's go in here and name them correctly, shall we? Because I have a feeling we've got them reversed. So let's lay that out. I'll lay it all out. I'll lay that out. You need to do a little bit of tracing or looking at names. So there's our max bound, there's a min bound. We'll just rename that. Max bounds and min bounds. And those two will feed out to straight out to our output, because these are the bounds that it's doing all the work with. And that way, it's really just a convenience thing, because if the bounds come out as vectors and whatever mesh, and we should rename that too. So if you didn't want to use the mesh for something, you've still got the information there. That should be bounds out. So it's really, yeah, that's really just a convenience thing. I hope this has explained everything and it's helped, and you're well on the way to building your own bounds node. And I'll see you next time. Thanks very much.